open source software means freedom, and building freedom tools cannot be considered a crime. This is the topic of the next speech, titled Open Source, Shielding Innovation from Corruption. Please welcome on stage Pavol Rusnák.
Good morning, everyone. How are you feeling today? I'm going to talk about open source today and why it's important. My name is Pavol Rusnák, and I'm a co-founder of Satoshi Labs Group. We are a group of companies that you have probably heard of before: Trezor, Invity, Tropic Square, and Vexel. And this group of companies share a common mission of strengthening individual power and independence. And how do we achieve this mission? We achieve it by hardware and software open source projects. You might ask, what is open source? Open source is code made freely available for running as you wish for any purpose. It's made freely available for studying and modification and redistribution of copies and distribution of modified versions of these copies. But it is not. Open source is not just sharing the source. It's also about the culture. It's about the developing in public. What developers do, they usually share their source code on the platforms like GitHub or GitLab, where you can see all the issues or open problems with these projects and pull requests, which are solutions to these issues. Open source is also a movement. Some people prefer to call this movement free software movement, and then we are talking about the free and open source software, abbreviated as FOSS. This movement is facilitated through open source licenses, which protect these freedoms I've been talking about earlier. So here I am as a representative of Satoshi Labs with this mission achieved by open source projects. But how did Satoshi Labs arrive here? So in 2012, I started Trezor with Slash, which was the first hardware wallet. But it was not only the first hardware wallet, it was also fully open source since day one. And this is the photo from that era, me and Slash. We are celebrating the day when Bitcoin hit $100 for the first time. So as you can imagine, it was a very long time ago. And this is all taking place in a hackerspace, Prague, called BRMLab, which we founded in 2010. And we were a group of open source enthusiast people who were trying to understand the world around them. And it proved that it's so much easier to understand how things work if you can read the source code and the documentation that describes how the thing works and how it's supposed to work. And one of the projects that belongs to that group was Linux. It's an operating system which was made in 1991 by Linus Torvalds, and around 15 to 20 years later, it has proven that it provides a lot of innovation and disruption in the operating system space. Like late 80s and 90s, the server market was dominated by commercial Unix distributions from various companies such as IBM, or Windows Server editions by Microsoft. And ecosystem on mobile phones was even more weird. There were so many different operating systems you probably have never heard of. But in 2012, it was becoming obvious that the server market has shifted to Linux completely. And on the phone, the revolution called Android was also happening, and Linux is an integral part of the Android operating system. And we recognize this innovation and disruption that Linux has done in the space, and we wanted to achieve something similar with Trezor. We knew that we are starting the whole new industry of hardware wallets, and we wanted to get it right from the beginning. That's why we made it open source. And I think we have succeeded in starting this industry, because today you have hundreds of different hardware wallet vendors that are participating in the free market of the hardware wallets. Now, we are trying to do the same with another project of ours called Tropic Square, where our ambition is no smaller than creating the world's first open source secure element chip. We are succeeding in this mission as well, but there is still a lot of steps ahead of us, and the journey is long and hard. But I believe that we will succeed in this mission as well. Another important aspect of the hardware wallet industry was interoperability. We knew that we want to make all wallets interoperable within each other, and that's why we based Trezor on BIP32, hierarchical deterministic wallets. And this is the way how we generate keys in the device, and combined with another standard which we came up with called BIP39, which converts entropy into words. We created a toolkit that literally every hardware wallet out there and almost all software wallets out there use, and making these wallets interoperable with each other. Another thing that I want to talk about is auditability. It's just amazing when the software is open source. You can visit the software repository and get immediate grasp of how the software is working, and that it's doing what it's supposed to do, and it doesn't do anything else it's not supposed to do. This was very crucial for Satoshi Nakamoto when he released Bitcoin. I don't think the Bitcoin would be so popular and it wouldn't get any traction if it was a closed source software. Everybody back then wanted to know whether the software really sticks to the Satoshi's white paper. Reproducibility is a thing connected to being open source, but it doesn't necessarily mean that open source software is reproducible. What it means is that the developers have to push this extra mile to provide a recipe for everybody out there to describe how their built environment is created, so everybody in the world can recreate the binaries the original software developer is producing, and show a proof that they are indeed coming from this published source code. I want to give a big shout out to the Wallet Scrutiny project led by Leo Vanderslap, where he goes through literally thousands of different software and hardware wallets and tries to build them from source, and to see whether the published binaries in various app stores or whether firmware distributed by hardware wallet vendors are indeed coming from the source that these companies have published. Like I said at the beginning, community is also very important for open source. If you look closely at the Trezor firmware repository, there are 237 contributors participating in the source code development. And of course, some of them are being paid by Satoshi Labs, but the vast majority are just enthusiasts trying to figure out how Trezor works. Maybe they found a bug, maybe they found a feature they want to implement in Trezor, and they send us a pull request to merge it in. And it's very amazing to meet these people both online on GitHub and both offline at the conferences and other gatherings. Being a part of hardware open source movement has also some other benefits that are not applicable to software, and that's because you are doing something in the physical space, you can see what others are also doing in the physical space. So there are thousands of different Trezor DIY builds all around the internet, and they come in various sizes, shapes, and colors. It's always very inspiring to see how creative people are. Another aspect of open source is availability. If you put the source code of your software online, you make it available to all people all around the world. Let's make a contrast here with the announcement that Google did a year ago when they made their artificial intelligence models available to 100 countries all around the world. But what this slide was actually saying was that this is not available in the European Union because they had to follow some stupid regulations. If their project was open source, everybody could use it from day one. Open source protects the freedom to make your own decision. What does it mean? Let me give you an example. This is an electric scooter I bought 3 years ago, and the only reason why I bought exactly this model was that the speed limiter was set to 40 kilometers per hour. A year later, I applied a firmware update that decreased the limit to 25 kilometers per hour. And if the firmware was open source, I would have never applied the binary distributed from this vendor, because I would have noticed that they are doing something I don't want. Or even better, I would have removed this anti-feature and built my own firmware that I would load to the electric scooter. So let me rephrase this. Being open leads to creation. Being closed leads to control. Or put it in other words, open source is viable competition to corporations. And if this doesn't resonate with you, let me give you another quote by Alex Friedman, said in one of his podcasts, open source is a hedge against corrupting nature of power. I really like it. And when I heard it for the first time, it resonated with me a lot because I'm a very different person to what I was 10 years ago when we started Trezor. But having this in mind makes a hedge against even you becoming an evil person. And I think this is a very, very strong claim, and I like to admire it. Okay, so this was very, very theoretical, but how to actually help the open source movement? First of all, find an open source project. There are millions of open source projects out there, and ideally, you could try to find the one that you use every day or at least once a week. Study the project's website. Usually, it says what the project goals are, who the maintainers team is, and so on. Then you can study project source repository. But now you might say, hey, Stick, but I'm not a developer. But it doesn't really matter. Like, try to read the build instructions, try to build the software from source, and you might hit some issues, but that's the part of the journey. If you succeed, try running the build result and to see that the result of your build is doing the same thing as the original binaries provided by the vendor. And if you hit any issues, try to join the community discussions. Mostly people are discussing on GitHub, or maybe they have a Telegram group, Discord group, Matrix group. Try to find when the developers are. You can ask them questions. They are usually very willing to help because this open source project is their baby and they want their baby to thrive. And you can also look into project issues and to see if there are some other people in the world that have hit the same issue as you did, and maybe then you can investigate these issues together. And if you haven't found any people like this, you can report these new issues, and again, you will get in contact with developers, and you can try to work together. If you figure out where the problem is, you can submit improvements. If you are not a developer, you can submit improvements to documentation. Like a lot of open source projects are under-documented, and believe me, developers, they prefer to write code, not the documentation, so they need a helping hand there. And if you are a developer, you can submit improvements via code. So you can code a new feature, you can code, fix bugs in code, and so on. Once you do this, you send a pull request, but also you can look into others people's pull requests. And this is my favorite way how to understand how the project works, because you see what problems is the software facing, and how is this particular problem solved in code. And this is very nice way how to get into the project. And also, I use this to learn, for example, new computer languages, because I have never done Rust before, for example, and reading Rust documentation was not really helpful to me. But once I started to dig in a smaller Rust projects, I was able to understand how it works and how the changes are affecting the whole thing. Once you will get acquainted with the code, you can help with the code reviews. This is also what I'm seeing a lot in the open source projects, that there is a group of developers that are really good at writing new features, and they prefer to write new stuff, but they don't have time to look at other people's changes. So this is also very helpful if you come and see the pull requests that have been made by others, and then you can comment on issues that you see. Like this is also applying for a Bitcoin Core project, where there are hundreds of open pull requests, but there are still a lot of people looking into code reviews of already existing code that is waiting to be merged, which also hinders innovation and makes the development slower. So let me end my talk with the plea: please become part of this open source movement and make the world a better place. Thank you.